There are problems within liberal societies that can't be solved currently. Problems that cause these societies to become fragmented and governments to become biased. Problems that cause harms to society. And to these societies, Team Proposition comes up here today to offer you atheism to promote neutrality. Let's look at some definitions for the House today. What do we mean when we say a liberal government? A liberal government is a government that leads the country, that believes in freedom for all, accepts various views, and is open to different perspectives. Such governments accept various behaviors as long as they don't harm society, without placing value judgments on them. We see currently that liberal governments have already gone against many religious beliefs. For example, in the USA, where promoting contraception even when it went against the doctrine of the religious institutions, such as the Catholic Church that's very present over there. By that principle, to achieve their aims, they should enforce atheism. So what do we mean when we say atheism? Atheism is the belief that no entity such as a God exists. Endorsing atheism is necessary in the status quo because atheism provides a very clear platform for the government to show that it isn't biased towards any religious groups in particular, and hence it achieves its aim of being a more liberal, a more neutral society. To be clear, sir, just a few clarifications. We aren't standing against any religion or standing for any religion, as we're not forcing anyone to convert to atheism as well. Instead, we want atheism to have a higher status in society because we still respect people's choice, we still respect that they have the rights to believe in their own religions as a result. So our burden for today is not to prove that atheism is good in and of itself, ladies and gentlemen. Our burden for today is just to prove that promoting atheism is going to help a liberal government to achieve the societal changes that they want in society. A society with more freedom and acceptance of beliefs and behavior. This is something that liberal governments want and are trying to work for too. Atheism is going to help them get to that stage. So we have four main arguments to prove to you why we're going to be able to do this. Firstly, I'm going to be talking to you about how we reduce fragmentations within society. Secondly, we're going to be talking to you about how we protect society. No, thank you. My second speaker is going to talk to you about how the decisions made now aren't going to be based on religious stances, and also about how we decrease tensions between atheists and other religions. So let's move on to my first substantive right now. We have to start with the premise, the simple premise, that in many liberal societies, many religions exist within the country. So we have different religious groups within itself. And these religious groups have different wants, different demands, and different needs. So we see disputes and differing demands being placed to the government. And in current liberal governments, many of them are secular. This means that they're going to have to accept and tolerate all these religious views. As a result, they're forced to take sides with certain religions and ignore the others. Now, what's the harm that comes about when this happens? We see huge divisions within society because one group is being prioritized over the rest. As a result, hatred towards the other groups is going to rise, xenophobia rises within these countries. Racism rises as a result as well, because these groups become increasingly intolerant of each other. So what happens is that the society becomes increasingly fragmented. This is principally wrong for the government to do. Why? Because governments shouldn't take sides. They're meant to take care of all the people within the country. So what happens under our model? When governments actively promote and embody atheism, they don't believe in any religion at all. As a result, all the religious groups within the country are placed at the exact same pedestal. Governments become a neutral body for change. And that's what governments are supposed to do. This is principally right, ladies and gentlemen, because governments are supposed to be a neutral body. They are meant to take care of every single group, every single person within those countries. Yes, sir.
But yet you are empowering one of these groups, atheists, in this diversity.
Ladies and gentlemen, atheism is going to be the route through which we're going to have neutrality within the nation. Why? Because when I'm an atheist, when I don't believe in a particular God, what happens then is that all these religious groups are placed on the same pedestal in my mind. As a result, I'm going to be able to treat each and every one of them equally, not placing any emphasis on one. So that point falls. But let's look at societies where the religious groups do get along. promoting atheism helps them as well. Why? Because in these societies, they know that the governments are not siding with anyone. As a result, they recognize that they all are neutral, that they all are equal, that the government sees them through equal eyes. So this is a foundation. It sets the important precedents for even better relations between these religious groups. As a result, we see that under our model, what happens is that society becomes more united, society is able to be less fragmented than it is today. Let's talk about my second substantive on how we promote or how we protect society. We start from the premise again that in many liberal governments, the governments take a secular role. This means that they have to be tolerant of all the religious groups within the country itself, right? This also means that there is no... Yes, sir?
Show us how, in the current status quo, the government somehow in a non-neutral way approaches any religion.
Well, okay, when the government is supposed to be secular, what happens is that they have to tolerate all the religious beliefs. And as I'm going to explain to you currently, what's happening is that some of these religious beliefs take the dominant narrative within the country itself. As a result of this taking the dominant narrative, as a result of some religions taking the stage, they're forced to give in to some and ignore the rest. This is something that I've already previously explained. This is why in a secular society, they cannot be neutral. You can only be neutral through atheism, which I'm going to explain to you right now. So because different religious institutes become the dominant narrative for order in the country, the misinterpretations, the different misinterpretations of the different religions are passed on within society. We can give you a few examples right here. Let's talk about Ireland, where abortion is banned, where there's no contraception within the country itself because the Catholics didn't believe in it. How did this harm the society? Because this meant that even if the person had a medical condition that really required an abortion, they couldn't get it. It meant that HIV was going to rise because they couldn't get the contraception. We already see this in India as well, where sati practices are being taken place, where women are forced to be burned after the husband is dead, against the law. Right? So we also see in the USA, where certain doctors refuse to abort certain patients because they saw that it was against their religions. So thus we see that the various misinterpretations of these religions cause harm to society. And in secular governments, they are unable to clamp down on this because they're trying to move and trying to appease everyone within the society itself. Let's look at what's happening when we have atheist governments. Atheist governments don't believe in any of these religions. As a result, they are better able to actually clamp down on these mispractices that actually harm society. So, since the governments are the biggest shakers of public opinion, when the governments show that they do not stand for any of these practices which harm society, what happens then is that they're better able to manage, they're better able to clamp down these mispractices and better able to protect society as a result. So because of this, we can clearly see that with atheism, governments are better equipped to actually clamp down the malpractices within the society and protect the people within the country itself. I've already shown you how atheism leads to a more neutral government as well. And I've already shown you why this is principally right, as governments have to be a neutral body when they're taking care of their people. So because of all these reasons, I'm especially proud to propose.
Can I have the time, please?
8:05.
8:06.
Nie znam, Just close the door, maybe. Thank you.
Let's now welcome the first opposition speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen,
something is neutral only as long as you don't play with it. In the case of proposition, we see a huge issue. They have not shown us how their model is different from the status quo, and we have not seen how the promoting atheism is different from promoting secularism. So first, I'll go through refutation of their two arguments, then I'll go through our substantial part, and also their second argument will link to our second argument, which is going to talk about the benefits of society for the religion. So, first of all, they have been claiming to us that only through promoting atheism, we can in fact issue secularism and neutral look on societal harms. So first thing, where there was a mistake in their case. Atheism still has its personal views. As long as atheism defies other religion, there is the subjective opinion of looking at all the issues. If atheism is presented in the government, they still have their personal stance towards all the issues that are defying either religion's values or defying the stance that religion organizations take on different issues. Secondly, it does not in any way exclude the fact that a politician still has his own personal stance towards any issue he's proposing or that he's standing against. All the politicians have their personal stance, which do not have to be linked towards religion or towards atheism. So we believe that even though if all the politics were atheists, they would still make decisions which would be for or against religion. And this is not a mutually, and it is not a situation. Yes.
Well, in a secular society, religion, they can't tell that religious institutions are wrong, so they have to bend to religious views. Would you then take away women's rights if the religion deems it fit?
No, we would not. Okay, we believe that the personal stance of the politicians are very reflected by the people of the country. It is most important for these politicians not to reflect even the religious views in this situation if the population of a country considers religion right. But at the same time, we believe that there's a certain moral obligation of these people towards what they're doing. So the second argument that they have stated is that religion promotes evil in society. Which, first of all, they have been talking to us about the fact of abortion. We believe that all these reasons for the harms of religion in society is not because of the religion itself at all. Of course, certain part carries with the religion, but again, certain part is part of society. It is not only that the Christian community has defined abortion, but it also that the society as a general valued the value of life. And this goes with a lot of different values which they have valued and pursued on, and this was a certain example of exclusion of, for example, abortion. And to this will refute our second argument about the benefits for society. So we believe that if we promote atheism, we're in a way defining religion in a society. And we believe that religion has such a special stance because it can persuade people into having a meaning in life. It can go deeper than any other thing. It can go deeper than law. So for subpoint A, we believe that religion actively encourages people to behave good in society. There's a huge difference between law and between religious rules. First of all, law is based on deterrence. It is based on the pure feeling that something is going to cost you something if you do something. And this is not persuasive enough. We believe that in this situation, religion is causing essential benefits for our society, and it's the fact that it can persuade people. It gives them a feeling of unique relationship with God or with any other entity, and if they're fulfilling this relationship, this intimacy, they're having tangible benefits for them. They feel like there's a higher power, they feel like they can get a lot more for behaving good. They have this value of love within themselves, and they're spreading this beneficial feeling in society. That's why, for example, we have seen a lot of religious charities. For example, 50% of charities of ICE in Africa are in fact Christian charities. And this is a huge benefit for society, and we see that promotion of standard societal values are actually being carried out a lot by religious groups. So the subpoint B is the benefits of psychology of people. If the religion is pursued in the society, we see that we feel that people, through this intimate relationship and the feeling of meaning something, and being capable of doing something with their life, and have a feeling that it matters, are gaining happiness in their lives. And we believe that what the proposition is doing is, through promoting atheism, is decreasing these religious benefits in society through, for example, governmental policies which are going to defy this, because atheism itself is standing against these religions. Now, let's move on to our first argument. which is about why governments should not intervene and why I believe it is essentially wrong. So, we believe as well in the power of secularity, just as the team proposition. However, we believe that in the opposition case, we're capable to achieve the secularity in a way better spot. If we don't play with this religion, and if we try to not put certain ideology into politics, which is enacting the denial of God, or denial of any sort of higher power entity, it is going to achieve better representation of the government through ideologies which are representing the situations. A lot of liberal governments are in fact promoting democracy, and promoting democracy means that these people are being asked what their opinion is. So what these countries are doing is exercising their will according to the will of the people living in these countries. So these countries are either financing proportionally these governments, or they're pursuing more of a secularism, which is not financing religious groups at all. And it's, for example, because they believe that politics should have no influence over religions, and no decision-making of a government should be based on this religion.
Madam?
And that is how the team of proposition is defining the secularism they're trying to ultimately achieve. It is because as soon as they have a bias towards looking at certain issues, with religion being a form of a religious group, then we see that this decision-making is going to be biased. And also we believe that is, yes?
Some people might interpret their religion in a way that does not agree with the objectives of a liberal government. For example, keeping women at home, preventing them from voting. So why should the government actively not endorse these religions?
Not actively endorsed.
Not actively.
So because there are certain standards in society which liberal governments are proposing. If they see that there's a certain social standard that a lot of religious groups within a community are promoting. That is, for example, whether you're Islamic or whether you're Christian, whether you're Buddhist, you're in a way promoting certain values, and these values are common for the society. Even if you're atheist, you're promoting these values, and this is the standard that is given. Of course, there are religious groups who are defying these values, and we believe that if the social standard is different, and we believe that something is more morally right, then we should defy the things that are doing the morally wrong things. And so, to sum it up, we believe that it is against the liberal government not looking at the people you're representing and not seeing their faith and ideology and the values that they're standing for. And because the logic of the proposition, which claims to achieve secularism through putting atheist politicians into the politics and promoting them through this, is wrong in the basis of establishing a religious group in trying to promote secularism. And we believe that this logic is fundamentally wrong. And so, foreseeing that these benefits are way better off in the status quo, we see that this proportional representation and happiness of people is being encouraged more.
Diversity,
Okay, this was 8-2.
Please welcome the second proposition speaker.
Today's debate isn't about the merits of religion. What it's really about is deciding some sort of factor or system for government that works in achieving the aims of a liberal government in this motion specifically. So firstly, let me first clear out the definitions on what's so different between secularism and atheism, although my first speaker already clearly labeled it and pointed it out for you. The very big difference from it, and why we would only push for atheism, is because with secularism, you admit that all religions do do stand apart in the decision-making of your governmental process. Therefore, when you have to pass certain laws or policies, you have to conform to some sort of religious boundaries that are already set in place. You have to conform to it, or you have to find ways to skirt it, further complicating the situation. You don't succeed in the liberal government anymore, as we already defined it for you, as a government that is supposed to be for the betterment and for the benefit of everyone in society, regardless of what kind of religion you're from, race, and etc. Therefore, we showed you how atheism, when in the first place, under the very aspect of atheism, admit that there is no God. We further proved the fact that we would stand for everyone as an equal human being, regardless of religion or religious boundaries. And that's the kind of thing we fail to understand on our side. And they also told us that promoting values to society is good, and that happens with religion. And we already characterized it for you from the very start, that today's debate isn't about proving to you whether atheism is really good or bad, but in the spirit of the motion, we had to prove to you whether it does achieve the aims of a liberal government, which means that does it really help fulfilling everyone's benefits and rights to freedom in that society under that liberal government. So they conceptually misunderstood the whole case today on what we actually are supposed to be fighting for. So on the first substantive, on how governments should not intervene, in which they told us that they would put on policies that would harm people, because it goes against the basic ideals of their religion. But we tell you that this does not happen, and it happens more on your side. Because in secularism, as you've been advocating on your side, you'd have to conform to some sort of religion in the very first aspect. That means you would be discharging and shortchanging some people that don't conform to the same religion, and that's bound to happen in a society with different religious point of views, and different people that stand for different religions. Therefore, we believe that we put on policies that harm people. It happens more on their side, because they're ignoring the other sides of community that don't agree to the same types of religious principles that you're going to be enforcing that policy under. Whereas on our side, we completely eradicate that situation, because we won't even tell the people that we're going to make policies based on these religious stances. And I'll be elaborating more on that in my substantives for today. But before I move on, yes, sir?
But this is what actually takes place in a secular society. Don't base your decisions on the religious views of politics.
So in a secular society, as we already defined for you, is when you admit that religions do coexist, and you have to admit that the government will adhere to all sorts of religions in place. That means inevitably, some sort of religious judgmental decisions will come into play when you make decisions for your people. Therefore, it is still skewed and biased on your side by the various numbers of religions that still exist and that you've told people that you will adhere to. Moving on to their rebuttals on our substantives on protecting society and the benefits that society incurs, in which they told us religions persuade people to behave well in society. Well, in the first place, it's not necessarily so. We gave you the example of sati and how we force women in India to walk through the fire when their spouse dies early because of other situations. And we told you how religion doesn't necessarily do this. Therefore, we pushed you to the very extent, does it even fulfill the prospects of being a good liberal government? That means achieving the aims of making sure that everyone gets the freedom to exist in a country without shortchanging themselves in any aspect. But they have never told us how liberal government is then achieved on their side when they're going to make decisions based on religious fundamental ideas. Moving on, they've also told us that religions cause essential benefits and promotes a relationship with God. We tell you, yes, it does, and we don't even contend to not doing that in the first place, because we're not saying that when we push for atheism, we're going to force people to conform to atheism, and we're going to force them to accept that there's no God at all. We still let them practice their religions, and we made it pretty clear in my first speaker that it still happens. They still practice their religions, and therefore promoting a relationship with God still occurs equally as fairly on our side in the very first place. So we don't see a problem with it not existing on our side. Instead, we allow it to happen. It's just that we want to fulfill the prospects of a liberal government which allows the freedom of everyone, and in the spirit of the motion, that is exactly what we need to push for, not for the merit of religion that they're pushing for on their side. So moving on to the substantives for today, on my first point on passing decisions not based on religious stances, Now, when religious governments stand for secularism in the very best scenarios on their side, or when they push for a dominant religion, they allow their policies to be swayed by certain religious claims, stances, or boundaries, mainly because they have to take into account religious stances or several religious viewpoints in their scenario, because therefore they are unable to entail everyone's stance in their society or stand for policies for every different person with different ethnic groups and religious groups, therefore which goes against the fundamental stance of a liberal government, which is for everyone in society. But on a comparative, we push for atheism, in which they push for an aspect where we don't take into account any religion. We push for the benefits of everyone as a basic, equal human being. And we already see this in homosexual marriages already slowly being allowed in states such as the USA, but some states are still completely against allowing it because it still has the dominant narrative of being a Christian state. Therefore, we see by not being a liberal government, they don't succeed in becoming a liberal government for everyone. Therefore, the rights of everyone isn't successfully carried out on their side. So, on the second point on reducing tensions between atheists and other religions. Now, right now, the perception of people have of atheists are negative and not entirely true, because they only see the atheists that manage to shout the loudest in their scenario, that is the most radical and the most extreme ones that push for a cause that goes against their own ideals in the very first place, the ones that demonize and put down other religions and shun them. But now when the government becomes the representative of it, it represents themselves in a rational and more unbiased way. They recharacterize the religion as a whole for the people in a society in a positive light, in a neutral and general light. They simply manage to promote neutrality through a calm representation, because the very fact that they want votes and garner support amongst the people for the government, they will continue to be neutral, they will not put down other religions, they won't shun them, and the very aspect that's succeeding in becoming a liberal government. They overcome the negative perceptions that people have of these radical atheists, therefore allowing more acceptance of these religious groups through these promoting a neutral stance in the very first place, therefore reducing tensions and animosity. And it's a further extension of how they'll only succeed in fulfilling the real prospects or the roles of a liberal government in the first place, which is what we were supposed to be contending for in the motion today. Because we showed you today that with a liberal government, it is in their very right and very definition to push for the freedom of rights for everyone in that scenario or in the society that they're ruling under. And only to do that are you able to do that when you don't acknowledge the fact that not everyone will be accounted to with secularism, because so many religions at play, it's hard for the government to ensure that everyone is taken into account. And we've already given you so many examples about homosexuality and etc. And therefore, because these scenarios exist, and therefore we believe pushing for an atheist stance is the best way for government to achieve its prospects of becoming a successful liberal government. Only then are we able to stand for the benefits and rights for everyone we are proud to propose.
Okay, so
Please welcome the second speaker from Slovakia.
Ladies and gentlemen, the team proposition has provided us with a wonderful definition and the nuance between the secularism and atheism. But what we are actually realizing on that side of the house is that actually they are not accompanying this change into their case. And their case clearly does not reflect what the difference between actively promoting atheism and having a secular society is. And this is what I'm going to be talking to you about in this debate in the first point. Then I'll move on to explaining what actually the promotion of atheism means. Then I will look on to explaining the religious group response to that policy, I will talk about benefits for everyone and the ability of the society to change, for example, adopting same-sex marriages, and then I will move on to our final substantive point of the special role of religion. But firstly, let's look at the definition and model problem that we have in this debate. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the idea of a secular society is that all of those religious groups that you have in the society have the same opportunity to practice their religious views. This is what we have. This is the status quo in the vast majority of Western liberal democracies. And what we see on that side of this debate is that they are trying to enforce us with the idea that secularism is the same as actively promoting atheism. Ladies and gentlemen, you can still live in a society where all the religious have equal opportunities, all religious have the ability to practice both of their views, but at the same time, you don't need to governmentally and actively promote atheism as one of the religions. Now, this is a very, very tricky thing.